Good afternoon from Dubai and good day to everyone tuning into this webinar. This is edition 4 and part 2 of the TMS webinar series COVID-19, a leadership perspective. Today we'll focus primarily on the way that COVID-19 is accelerating the digitalization of the shipping, ports, logistics and related sectors. This topic over a 2-part sequel has generated a huge amount of interest. And I say this because we have received in excess of 700 registrations today. And together with edition 1, the number of this one single topic is 1,500 in total. A warm welcome to our panelists, and joining us today is Mr. Khalid Al-Hamad, Director of Fleet Management, Barbaris. Dr. Nora Al-Dahiri, CEO of Makta Gateways. Mr. S.V. Anchan, Chairman, Safe Seas Group, and a very early morning to you, Anchan, in New Jersey.
Morning.
Mr. Chris Peters, CEO, TriStar eShips. Mr. Hans Christian Modost, COO of Makura Group. And Dr. Shireen Osman, Regional Head, Marine Advisory, DNVGL. Please allow me to thank our partners, Abu Dhabi Ports, ADNOC Logistics and Services, JN Bakshi, Makura Group, and the Safe Seas Group. So without any further delay, I'd like to hand you over to the editor of the Maritime Standard and your moderator, Clive Woodbridge. Over to you.
Thank you, Trevor, and good morning to everybody. Lovely to have you with us. Thanks to all our panelists, thanks to all our sponsors, Abu Dhabi Ports, ADNOC, JN Bakshi, Makura, and the Safe Sea Group, and also to all our online attendees. Wherever you are in the world, we're glad to have you with us and hope you enjoy this webinar. And as Trevor said, this webinar is going to focus on digitalisation and the way in which the pandemic has shown where the future of shipping lies, and that is through the implementation of practical digital solutions. In a relatively short space of time, the industry's come a long way, but there is still some way to go. Recently, a group of shipping industry organisations, including BIMCO, called for the acceleration of digitalisation in maritime and logistics, in particular on areas like electronic bills of lading, and pointed out that just 49 of 174 IMO member states have port community systems. So while things will never go back to the way they were, there's still some way to go before we embed change and take full advantage of the digital solutions that are on offer. So I'm going to start the process by asking each of our panelists in turn the same question and ask them to reply in about a minute or so. And as I said, I mean, there's a perception that the pandemic has turbocharged digital development in shipping. I wonder if each of you can sort of point to one example in your own company or in your own sphere of operations, which might actually illustrate how that has been true. I'm going to start with Dr. Nora Al-Dahiri. Dr. Nora, welcome. Perhaps you'd like to sort of give us an example of where you think digitalisation has made a quick win during the pandemic era.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Clive, and good day to everyone and our audience in the house. I'm Dr. Nora Al-Dahiri. I am the CEO of Makta Gateway and also the head of digital cluster in Abu Dhabi Port Group. So early on, Abu Dhabi Ports had believed that digitalization is a core part of their business and strategy. And very early, they have invested in digital. Meantime, by starting even the first semi-automated port terminal in the region, and after that, they have invested in Makta Gateway in order to establish their digital arm. Now, this digital arm has started the first port community system in the UAE, following the international standards. And this have given us a lot of boost, and it became evidence that our investment and our decision from very early on were in the right place, not just because of the pandemic maybe accelerated our development, however, because of our response and our resilience during the pandemic. So for us, Clive and Abu Dhabi Ports, what we have witnessed, that during the pandemic, we were among the first entities to go completely remotely online, working in all sectors across Abu Dhabi Ports, not just in the digital, but also for the VTS, for the marine sector, for the port operation. We have managed to run the port from a very far distance. We were running Khalifa Port from Mina Zayed Port, and etc. So we were very ready for this pandemic in terms of technologies. However, The way we have looked at this pandemic is what else can be done. Because as CEO of a digital company, especially in the port and the maritime industry, it's a natural thing as our industry or our development. It is very unfortunate. However, for the digital transformation, it became evident that we have no other option but to go all online in terms of services and operation. So
okay. Okay, well, thanks very much, Dr. Nora. Well, we'll come back, but I think if we can sort of keep our opening remarks, to around about a minute and a half, and then we can move on to some more detailed questions. Mr. Anchan, what would you sort of highlight as being perhaps one particular thing that has taken place that illustrates the way the pandemic has impacted digitalization?
In fact, good day to everybody. Anchan from SafeSea. What we have seen is the positive impact of digitalization of COVID-19 across the industry have salvaged to a larger extent. So let me share one of our experiences. Such, today we have a class member on this panel, and that has kept the technology of the class. Advanced technology has played a vital role in keeping the vessel movement active in the current atmosphere. And what I mean by the active in the current atmosphere is basically, class accepting the digital proof or nullifying the recommendation and extension of the vessel certificates, kept the vessel seaworthy, So this technology in a way has helped us to remain afloat, We have taken over the vessel very recently, just about 3 weeks back in India, and we could absolutely manage this, without any people on board, whether it's from the technical team or from the class, So I think in this situation, the class has played a very, very important role, along with the flag. So we must see some more progress in terms of advancing this, so that there's very little interference or the physical attendance from the class, So this way, in such situation, we can keep moving, So I must sort of focus more on the class that has kept us, remain in this business during this COVID-19.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Anchan, and you highlighted class. So perhaps that's an opportunity for me to come to Dr. Shireen Osman and ask him for his opening remarks and to highlight a sort of key development that he thinks illustrates the way pandemic has helped digitalization move forward.
Yes, thanks, Clive, and good afternoon to everyone. I think as DMVGL, as a class society, I think our aim to enhance safety, quality, as well as the environmental performance of the global shipping industry. I think one key thing to realize is that to us, this is not new. Every year we spend 5% of our annual revenue on R&D. And the thing is that out of this investment, we spend significant portion of them on digitalization initiatives, right? So like what the previous speaker, Anchan, have mentioned, and that this investment really, now have reflected the importance of it. That, for example, we have this 24/7 direct access to technical expert, our date service that moves, following the sun. And with that 24/7 support, we also can produce instantaneously e-certificate or electronic certificate that was mentioned. And that is not PDF file transmission, it's really on the cloud. In addition to that, we introduced the remote survey. But remote survey, we don't started recently. It was in 2018. And of that, Clive, just to share with you, we have something like 15,000 remote survey that we have done globally. So to us, this has become a norm. And with this COVID-19, it's the demand for such digital services has accelerated definitely. And as DMVGL, we are more than ready to support the industry in this area.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shireen. Khalid Al-Hamad of Bari. What tangible examples can you point to of how digitalization is turbocharging, has been turbocharged over the last 8 or 9 weeks? I think you're on mute, Khalid, unfortunately. I don't know if you can.
Thank you very much, Clive. If you can hear me now.
Perfectly.
Yes, and good day to everyone. Just to explain, Bahri has a number of business units. Bahri is the mother company, of course, and then there are a number of business units within Bahri. We have the Bahri Oil, the Bahri Chemical, the Bahri Logistics, the Bahri Dry Bulk, and then Bahri Ship Management, where I come from. So I'm working for the Bahri Ship Management, and we are managing the full fleet of Bahri. About at the moment 86 vessels, ocean-going vessels. In addition, we have other vessels coming in. Now, going to what Dr. Nora has said, we have already invested in digitalization years ago. I remember as back as 2014, I used to receive as a fleet manager the variances for invoices, for purchase orders, procedure signatures, and all of these things. All of this has moved online. We are fortunate enough within the Bahri Ship Management to have our own developers. Many years ago, Bahri Ship Management had the developers. They developed their own system for plant maintenance system, including procurement and other systems. So we had the platform and we had the developers in-house. And over time, based on our experience, we managed to enhance those systems. So when the pandemic actually hit in March and we were requested to lock down and start working from home, there was no impact whatsoever. So we were totally fortunate that our operation continues to run smoothly with no impact. We have always connected remotely to our server and the systems are online and working fine. If anything, the only change that we have made was previously we used to use, I'm not making advertisement for anyone here, by the way. We used to use Skype, now we use MS Teams. That's the only difference we have changed. So other than that, it has been working perfectly.
Okay, thank you very much, Khalid. Over to you, Chris. How has it been from TriStar's point of view? What changes have you seen that you can point to illustrate this transformation in the business?
I think to follow on from previous speakers, we, again, as Bari, we were set up as a company on the shipping side to work from home. Many of the shipping professionals were working regularly late in the evenings, weekends. So from that side, the digitalisation and technology was already there. But the two things to note right now, as previously mentioned with class, I mean, again, with quite a sizable fleet as Bari have as well. We have dry docks that are coming up. We had one that was actually due this month in June. And through digitalisation, we have successfully worked with class to look at the vessels and have postponement for a couple of months until things can become clearer. And then on the other side, what we've seen is we took delivery of a new building from Hyundai Mipo in South Korea on Monday this week, 2 days ago. So that was a shipbuilding contract signed in December 2018, and the original scheduled date, 15th of June, we successfully completed that, even with all the challenges in the last couple of months. It's the first time that we've actually conducted a closing meeting by video conference. And one of the notable things is that where documents used to have to be notarized, apostilled, that was initially not possible for a while in the UAE, then it became possible, but through digital technology. So the government here went online and actually put in that process. In the end, as an industry, we actually agreed with everybody that those certain documents didn't even require it because of the way we were going through legal opinions and the digital process. So there's been several changes in how we've operated on a day-to-day basis in the last couple of months. And again, it was quite good to have a ship closing through Zoom.
Chris, quite an impressive achievement in these times to get a ship delivery spot on target. So well done to all concerned in that. Coming over to Hans Kristian, you're a supplier of technology and technology solutions. What's your take on the past few months?
Yeah, hello Tony, also from me. It's been very interesting. I mean, our mission is to help international sea trade, seaborne trade execution go digital. So it's sort of inherent in what we do. We've been around for 20 years. We got 700 people across 8 offices. So what the other panelists described, learning to work remotely, that's sort of in our DNA. But what we have seen in the market, just at this stage, maybe mention 2 points. One is, as people don't sit together anymore, technical operations, finance, chartering, there has been a requirement for technology to help knowledge sharing. What we call tacit knowledge, what people know, and you can share that when you're in one big room, that wasn't necessarily possible anymore. So there's been a significant increase in interest in looking for platforms that help enable that. Another more practical example is getting cash on board, cash to master, right? Where in certain ports, this is not now forbidden because risks of nodes being infected. So one of our solutions is e-wallet and CCM cards. That's actually been a huge and quick change from physical money on board ships to electronic delivery of money to masters and to crew. So those are two examples I would just highlight in the intro.
Thank you, Hans Christian. I'm sure there's some points there we'll return back to. So now I'm now going to ask each panelist in turn a very specific question. And I'm going to start with Dr. Nora Al-Dahiri again. The question is, Dr. Nora, what role has digitalisation played during COVID-19? And in particular, how has Macta Gateway's digital logistics offer evolved to meet the needs to play that role?
Sure. Thank you for this question. Maybe the first thing that we have done during the pandemic is to be sure that everyone can continue to work online and they can continue to work remotely, make available all the tools, not just for our employees, but also for our customers, because there were a lot of training sessions that needed to be conducted for new product. So we did all these training sessions online. So the second thing that we had engaged in doing is basically new products that needed specifically in Abu Dhabi for our region. So one of the early things that has been noticed that there is a lack of visibility and information about warehouses location and the availability of warehouses and the way in which we can book those warehouses specifically for the medicine supply and also for the food supply. So we directly engaged and created a new platform. It's a marketplace where we brought all the suppliers of the warehouses together and we made available those listing of warehouses and the booking of the warehouses so that we can help the government in their effort to secure the food and the medicine that's required. Also, we have participated in setting up the humanitarian cities. Humanitarian cities, of course, does not just need the food and the separation and the medical supply and all of this, but also it is very important for the people, especially who are on the lockdown for more than 14 days, to be able to communicate with their families. So our team have helped in setting up the humanitarian cities from a connection point of view. We also have engaged in several other projects. We have produced more than 5 products very quickly for the free zone and the industrial zone as well, not just the port and the logistics side, the warehouse and the port itself, but also we have ran services, the industrial and the free zone online, more than 89 services we had to provide at once within 1 month, roll it out to all the customer so that we can eliminate the visits to the port or to the industrial zone. As you know, Abu Dhabi ports have many clusters, logistics, industrial zone, ports, etc. So we have to be responsible for setting up all the services that might be missing in order to make them available. This all has been grounded by also launching a very important tool for Abu Dhabi, which is called the Advanced Trade and Logistics. During the pandemic, and despite that everyone was sitting at home, His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan have blessed us by his presence in order to launch the integrated Abu Dhabi trade and logistics platform during the pandemic as a statement for the trust that has been placed on us, on the government, and all the effort that we have placed to support the pandemic, but also because we wanted to link more than the ports for the systems that we already have. So now we are the mandated developer and operator of the single window in the Emirates of Abu Dhabi for the air, for the sea, for the rail, and for the land and border crossing.
One question I have to follow that up was, obviously there's been a big increase in demand and you're working with a wider range of clients. Have you been aware of any limitations of the existing systems? And are you actually sort of now working on solutions to sort of address those limitations?
So Clive, always, before we spoke here during even the session, we were always talking about the technology and the technology, how it needs to be working in order to be effective. Now, the good thing about what we have is that we have, as Mr. Khalid said, our own developer who are sitting in-house. They are in-house developer. So we respond to management that is requested in any system. So more than 90% of the customer suggestions or improvement or requests are fully implemented in our system because we have the facility, we have the team on board who can respond very quickly for any issues that might arise.
Okay, I'll ask the next question to Khalid Al-Hamad. Bari has been a digital pioneer, as we know, but I just wondered if there have been any particular digital initiatives that you've taken since the beginning of the pandemic, and what benefits you've seen as a result of those.
Well, as I said before, fortunately, we have always been digitized. There wasn't really any major changes that we had to apply during this pandemic. It's just accelerating using the online meeting. Probably this was something that we had to do internally because we have been doing this externally. You keep in mind that we have to hire lots of crew from different countries around the world. So we have always used the remote video interviews, and it just ended up using it with our own teams as well and departments. The other thing that we've added that wasn't there was the digital signature. Although we have most of our work and processes are electronic and on the existing platform, we still had a few papers that we had to sign. I'll give you an example. For example, hiring a new candidate for a captain or chief engineer, it required a certain number of people to actually sign this paper. So this actually now is being applied online. It was immediate, did not take time. We started with the Acrobat signature and now we moved on to the DocuSign. So now we are completely paperless, and I'm talking about just a few papers that we had to do physically before. In addition, the other things that we are moving into and been working for a very long time is trying to digitize the vessels in terms of to get a digital vessel within the office. We've been working on the subject for many years, where we monitor the performance of the vessels. We have certain data acquisition systems that send us information for analysis. However, we are expanding into that realm where we can get as much as we can and as much data from the vessel so we can see it here for monitoring and to assist the vessel whether there's issues that they might have in the future, technical or otherwise.
I mean, one of the technologies that has been flagged up as being a game changer for shipping is blockchain. Have you seen during the pandemic that actually some of the blockchain technologies that you use have come into their own, or is this something that's still very much work in progress?
Unfortunately, our vessels, they don't visit Abu Dhabi, so we have not used the blockchain. I know Abu Dhabi's been working on this for a very long time. But a good example that we discussed before we started this meeting was the BDN. We're still using a physical BDN, to be honest with you. So there is no such thing as a blockchain BDN. Classification societies and some of the flags have been working on this for a very long time, where we do receive electronic certification and documentation, and this has been working very well for us. But in terms of communicating with the ports, talking about within our industry, there's still lots of communication through emails and documentation that the agents have to take care of in different departments. So as of now, not every port actually has the blockchain and the capability to go fully digital. And this is something that the ports themselves have to invest in, such as Abu Dhabi and others.
I'll now come to Mr. Anshan. Mr. Anshan, the Safe Sea Group obviously uses digital tools. I wonder, to what extent are they helping you meet your operational targets in terms of, delivering high quality of services and even operating sort of profitably and with the margins that you require? Has digital been a sort of a big help during the COVID in terms of being a ship operator?
We as CFC are involved into the bulk tanker and the liner service as such, when I say liner, it's NVOCC. As for the liner service is concerned, NVOCC, we have not seen much of a change. In fact, technology has helped and we have used that to the optimum because we are catering to the retail industry as such, So the exposure is not much, and even all the steamship line or the shipping line, they have best of technology in place. Okay, so we have not seen much of a change there. we are doing sort of, or rather we could retain the business and we could enhance the business through this technology, by using to the optimum level, which was not the case previously, But as far as the tram trade is concerned, I'm talking of the bulk and the break bulk, and the tanker thing is concerned. I have not seen much of a change that technology has brought, because as shipping is a people's business, unlike Amazon. There is a high stake, capital intense business. So we still need some sort of, and it still demands a human interface. Yes, we are not meeting the people at this moment. The technology is helping us, like Zoom or Skype, wherever needed. But I still feel, moving ahead or in futures, we can't stay away from this, from these conferences or some platform to meet. That's where, we can do the business, or we can do a larger business, whether it's in terms of chartering, or whether in terms of S&P is concerned, or even the ship finance is concerned. So where there'll be still demand to have some sort of an in-person meeting as such. I don't think we can do away with that. Unlike in the liner trade, where technology can sort of replace human-to-human contact, or have replaced human-to-human contact, but not in the tram trade as such. So I have not seen, or don't foresee much of a change that technology can bring, because in the past also, if you have experience, as far the broking is concerned, or S&P is concerned, or even the ship finance is concerned, they tried to sort of automate that, but still nobody was successful, because of human interface or interactions are needed. So yes, it has helped us in the liner trade, but as far as the tram trade is concerned, I still feel that technology will not help, because of the high stake, or the capital intense business.
Would you like to see the next steps be, both within the industry, and more wider in terms of general trade? What should the next steps be for the global shipping and trade community?
No, sorry, I lost you. Can you repeat?
I just wondered, Mr. Anshan, what did you see as being the next steps for the trade and the industry generally in terms of digitalization? What would you like to see happen?
See, as far as the business is concerned, the commercial business, we have all the technology in place for the liner trade, and for the tram trade, I said still the human interaction is needed. What I see for the business, we can all talk about the technology, we can all talk about advancement of the technology as such. The most important point is the crew issue that we are all facing. We have all ignored them. We see that the citizens get stuck in some part of the world. Every respective government has sent a charter flight, or made some sort of a or given some solution for bringing them back home. But we as a shipping community, or the respective government, have ignored the crew issue as such. So unless that is regulated, we need to regulate that. So whether it is IMO, whether it's ILO, whichever body, they have to step in here. They have to sort of, find a permanent solution, or in situation like this in future, if we come across, so that they don't get stuck. Please do not forget that 94% of the trade is through ocean. So without them, we will not even have a food on the table. But we are given a stepmotherly treatment to this crew. So I feel there should be some regulation that has to come in, and wherein whether it is respective government, or whether it is P&I club, or the underwriters can step in to sort of fund this to the ship owners or to the ship operator. Today we are lost as the ship owners and the ship operator, because the exposure is so huge. It is neither covered by any of the underwriters. So maybe the underwriter has to sort of go back to the drawing room and redraw the underwriting clause for COVID-like situation, and apart from that, if we find any of the COVID polluted vessel, the vessel gets stuck. We don't know till when the vessel will get stuck, and we have not been compensated. Yes, technically we are paying these for flying a flag of convenience, because none of the government want to sort of want to provide any financial aid or the stimulus package for the vessel that are flying flag of convenience. I don't know about ship owners who are flying, say, US flag or any of the recognized country flag, but today we got stuck because of this problem. So what I feel, we can talk about technology, but more important is to sort of regulate the crew matter, so that we know that it's a regulation, and we know that this is well covered by P&I Club. We know that in case of the vessel getting stuck because of the COVID, we are sort of, we have been compensated, and so that we don't have to take this huge brunt.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Anchan. I'm going to come to Chris Peters now, because I know that at TriStar and eShips generally, the social responsibility, corporate social responsibility is a high priority, and in particularly the welfare of your seafarers, and you've done a lot of work on that in recent years. I just wondered, has digitalisation helped you achieve those corporate social responsibility targets? And if so, perhaps you could share some examples of how you've been using technology to that goal.
I think I concur with previous speakers that when it comes to the seafarers, I mean, this is it's human capital. So digitalisation doesn't particularly help with human capital to a great degree. I'd like to pick up on what Mr. Anchan said there, that seafarers are now stuck at sea for many, many months, some of them overdue. And this is something that the panellists we were discussing before the main conference came on, but that's not really the focus of this conference. And we historically have had, when we had Dubai as a hub for international transport on the airlines, we've had many of the crew that would come through the office to receive instructions or just to meet the people and get an understanding here. And that is now all online. So whether it's Zoom, Teams or whatever, then interviewing officers, crew, discussing with people, that's now all moved to online. And maybe that will continue in the future as well, unless people happen to be coming through Dubai. I think as a shipping industry, we've been hit badly, but by no means as bad as the aviation industry. So from our side, it's I agree with the blockchain and the technology. It is in other logistics areas. It is moving in the ports, but within shipping, it's not quite there yet. Picking up on tramp shipping in particular. Again, it's moving humans to various locations and getting them on and off ships. For the seafarers, that's something that technology can't change.
So, I mean, are there particular apps in technology that you want to highlight? I mean, for example, I know people have talked about, that the paying seafarers has tended to be a largely cash-based system. Do we need to move towards digital? And also, there's still a lot of paper involved in the shipping and on board and ashore. Is that an area where you want to see progress? I just wondered. You seem to be a little bit downbeat, Chris. I just wondered where you saw the solutions.
It's not been downbeat. I just think the industry, the paperwork, bills of lading, all of those things, it should be with the technology we have on ships these days, that physical pieces of paper don't necessarily have to switch from party to party. I think Khalid mentioned the auto signatures. That's something we've been using ourselves on finance documents, but there's no particular reason why when ships are transferring documentation that this cannot move digitally between the ships and between offices. It's something that I think a lot of people were looking at before COVID-19. I mean, smart ship technology, I know Bari were a pioneer a few years back when they hosted their first conference on smart ship technology. And many of the ship managers out there are looking at their own solutions. we've been following several of those. We've installed different systems on a couple of different ships to see how that can improve the industry or improve our vessels. But again, where individual companies have bought their own product, they're not willing to share that onto other ships. And I think information sharing between these technologies needs to improve so that it benefits the entire industry. I think that people have a lot of proprietary information. They want to keep it to themselves because they see it as a financial asset. But it is also something that if the information was shared on a better basis, we could probably improve the overall position for all owners.
Thank you, Chris. I see a lot of people nodding there about the need for sharing and collaboration. I'm sure that's something that we will probably come back to, but I think it's an absolute must. I'll come over to Hans Kristian Wardhorst now. Again, Hans Kristian, perhaps it's a good time to sort of bring in a technology provider. I just wondered, to what extent are we seeing an upturn in the digitalisation of the port call process as a result of COVID? Are we seeing changes that you've seen over the last 10 or 8 weeks?
Yes, it's the short answer, but there are so many cues I could take from previous speakers, which is wonderful. I think one important thing about digital is it's not about systems. Systems themselves or particular technologies like blockchain, they don't solve anything on their own. And I think that's been our philosophy for 20 years, that we build platforms, but they are manned platforms. And I would say that as I mentioned in my opening comments, that the need, desire for support, instant support, whether it's via chat or on the phone, has increased dramatically during COVID when people did not sit around maybe more experienced colleagues. So I think the whole thing around also that Antoine mentioned about it's a people's business, that's very true. And that's why I think I've been a participant at the Bari Week for a number of years, which is super inspiring. There's a lot of very interesting initiatives happening. The thing is, though, that often the question afterwards is, so what can I go and do different tomorrow? Rather than talk about, crewless vessels or I don't know, drone deliveries is not a thing of the future. That is actually happening right now. But there's a huge desire for saying, what can help me here and now? And there, our opinion is that technology alone, that doesn't cut it. You give people a new system. Typically, that will come with a requirement to start working in a different way, maybe even doing additional tasks as an investment in the future. The second point I would just want to mention is on your specific question, Clive. So one thing is to take documents or paper, go from analog to digital, if you like, scan documents instead of physical documents. But the really interesting value for stakeholders is when you're able to actually lift data off those documents and start using data in a decision support context. And even more so, and this was Chris's point, even more so when you're able to aggregate and anonymize data to a point where you can actually start not just benchmarking you against yourself, how am I doing this year compared to last year? No, how am I doing compared to an anonymous peer group? And that is a trend that is relatively new, that CEOs are saying, we want to be part of this. We don't want to, the competitive advantage is not so much in do we have the greatest system, it's in do I have the people who get the most out of available systems and data. So that was a little bit around the bend, but we see there's much more interest in give me intelligence. What do I need to know before I go to a port? Rather than saying, it is what it is. And their digital processes with data coming out of it is a huge differentiator.
Yeah. And what are the main benefits that you think users have seen during this crisis? And do you think they will go back to the old ways, or are these changes permanent in the way people are doing things?
No, I think we've seen an acceleration of change. Initially when most of the world started working from home, everybody had to settle down in a new reality, with families around, but I think it has quite quickly led to much more curiosity, much more Now there's less need to sit together in a physical meeting to take a decision. There's much more agility built into processes is what we've seen. So we have seen an acceleration in adoption of new tools. And as with any new habit, because these are essentially, you're changing your habits. You do this for long enough, it becomes your new, it's part of the backbone. So I can't see it go back. And we mentioned before the cash or near cashless switch to e-wallet, which not only is a safety benefit, but it's also a cost benefit for the seafarers. If you have money on your phone and you don't need to pay exorbitant transaction fees, whether it goes to the crew or it goes to the ship management company, that's a benefit. That's not going to be rolled back, of course. There's one important element that has happened in the midst of all this, and that is compliance. Compliance, of course, is important, but OFAC is not on lockdown, right? Or economic policy. So we have seen a significant increase in interest when it comes to counterparty compliance risk, sanctions risk. How do we know that the people we do business with are kosher? In addition, of course, to credit risk. We live in a market that it's a difficult time for many industries. So your counterparty risk assessment is probably more important than ever before. And that also renders itself to digital solutions. Because you can't go and visit your counterpart. You can't go sit down and say, do we trust these people? Please send me your annual reports. And that's not going to change back either to the old ways, I think.
Okay, thanks very much, Hans Christian. And Dr. Shireen Osman, you've been very patient, so I'm coming to you last but not least, as they say. Your current role at DNVGL spans both the Middle East and Singapore, Southeast Asia. I wondered if you're seeing any variations in approach to digitalisation, and if so, how is DNV working with stakeholders in those regions to take things forward?
I think just to be clear that my current responsibilities covering Southeast Asia, India, and Australia, New Zealand. I used to be based in Dubai for 8 years, so I do have a good understanding about the ecosystem in the Middle East. I think before I answer to that question, just to further reiterate the discussion by Chris and Hans, then that I think in DNVGL, right, when we look at digital transformation, we look at 3 different dimensions. One is on the people side. I think the other part is on the processes. And the third, then we talk about the tools and technology, right? So there's a lot of discussion, of course, about the new tools and technology, but sometimes we forget that, if just looking at the technology side without looking at how the processes will change, right? Whether the management system, the SOPs, the work instruction, that it needs to be adaptive. But more importantly, then that the people side, right? In terms of the mindset, it's not just about the skill set, the domain knowledge, but also the mindset. And in our experience, then that when we go through this transformation, we need to also consider how do we change the people, in terms of the capability, the skill set, bring in new talents or new knowledge, but also on the mindset part. So I think on that note, something that for the companies to consider. So now going in terms of the maybe a bit of different in terms of how things are being done, let's say in Singapore ecosystem versus the Middle East. I think in Singapore now, there's a realization then that you need to collaborate more with the industry. And what is key is then that there needs to be more standardization, right? And this also was mentioned. If, everyone is doing their own tools, their own development, and then different, information could not be communicated, right, from, let's say, one entity to the other, then you can only see what you're doing, right? But you're not being able to benchmark or compare. And this is what Hans mentioned, right? And indeed, that is what we see now. We see that in Singapore, there's also a lot of charterers, in addition to ship managers and the ship owners, that they would like to have more transparency, more visibility, because they themselves would like to benchmark in terms of the fleet that they charter in. How do they compare, one owner or one, fleet versus the other? So there is a need for call it the data to be shared, but more so than that for the whole standardization process, to happen. And Clive, if you allow me, there's a question by one of these audience, also talking on the same subject in terms of the standardization and what DMVGL can do. I think some of the things that we do, for example, when trying to help the entire ecosystem, is to organize what we call joint industrial project, where we try to bring in different stakeholders together, focusing on a common goal, and then working out together how can we come to certain consensus or standardization in various areas. And this is something that we have done a lot. We introduce a lot of recommended practice and best practice, and this comes a lot also from joint industry project that we have managed and facilitated. So I see a lot of it also now happening in Singapore. I'm not too sure the latest, but I think this is an area that within the stakeholders in the Middle East, in UAE, could organize themselves. Of course, the MVGL can facilitate, to have joint industry project that come to some common standard that everyone can benefit.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Shoaib. One of the things that a lot of classification societies are now working on is digital or remote surveying. Is that working well in your experience? And are you seeing any an increased demand for that kind of service?
Like what I mentioned earlier, I think for the MVGL, we started remote survey in Q4 2018. And so far we have done 15,000. So I think a lot more than any other class society combined. And the reason why we look at it is because we think then that this is the way forward, right? That if you do not need to be on board, why need to be on board, that you can reduce the travel time. But the other element of remote survey is then that, if you send a surveyor to the ship, you have expectation on the competence of the surveyor, right? As being your eyes and ears. But our process of remote survey, we have experts, and sometimes 2 to 3 experts looking at the video. So we are able to utilize different experts for different areas in the most cost-effective manner. So I think that is where we have combined, not from just avoiding the need to travel, but being able to bring in the right expert for the right type of survey. And we see then that, yes, we expect this to expand further because it has worked so far. And with COVID-19, we expect that demand to accelerate further.
Okay, thanks very much. Oh, we've heard all our speakers now reply to their questions. I don't know if anybody wants to pick up on anything that anybody else has said. I mean, we've heard a lot of comments about the need for standardization and collaboration. We've also heard about the human element and the importance of integrating digital with humans. I don't know if anybody wants to pick up on. Khalid, do you want to pick up on anything that somebody else has said?
Yes, Clive, I want to pick up. I think Hans was referring to this, and also probably Usman was referring to this. The technology and the software and the hardware is there. And it's amazing. The only limitation is our imagination. So whatever you want to do, whatever you want to implement, you have the technology. It's getting the people to understand what they need. We do have processes that we are used to, and you do need to step back. The difficulty in this whole subject is that first you need to keep an eye on what's happening within the industry, what technologies are available, because they are there. And then to step back and say, okay, what am I doing now? How can I adopt certain technologies to make me more efficient? And even if necessary, I can change some of our processes. This is what I was referring to before, that we, fortunately, during this pandemic, we have proved that we have been very resilient. The whole thing is totally automated. I remember a few years back, our finance team were a little bit complaining about the number of invoices that we used to receive. We issue about 35 to 40,000 POs per year because of the size of the fleet. And of course, these purchase orders, they have material received on board the vessel, and then you have to acknowledge and all of that. The invoices then come into the finance. So we had finance, we had a large number of accountants sitting and just verifying the invoices, that they make sure that the purchase order is actually matching the invoice. And with their help and with the help of our IT, we managed to automate this process completely. And so now the vendor actually uploads their invoices. The system links it with the purchase order. It verifies if there is any change, any difference between the cost of the actual purchase order versus the invoice. And then it starts to process. If there is nothing, it automatically processes the payment. If there's a certain variance based on the percentages, it goes to different approval authority to check that variance. So that automation was fantastic, and it actually reduced enormously the man hours that we required in finance to follow up on these invoices. So the systems are there, and you can take it even further steps, I'm sure, when you have intelligent systems reading and analyzing all that information, which we are moving into as well. So it is limited by our, as I said, our imagination. And of course, you need to have everybody's buy-in, because at the end of the day, many of these automation, digitalization, and processes do impact people at the end of the day. So when you will have some certain people resisting these changes because they impact their job directly. But it is there, it is available. It is a general knowledge that unfortunately within the shipping and maritime industry that we are very slow to adopt technology if you compare us with the airlines or other transportation entities. But we are moving there. I think maybe we're a bit slow because the vessels themselves, when you compare with the rest of the transportation industry, the vessel is slow. Okay, the maximum you can go maybe 30, 40 kilometers per hour. So which is for the people who don't know this. That's the comment I had. Thank you.
Okay. Kristian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. This is music to my ears, Khalid. Thank you very much. Because that's how we were born initially 20 years ago. Bringing disbursement accounts into the digital age, which they are now. But I just wanted to mention two things. One is, one of the challenges I think that we find when we engage with our customers and prospects, and we have about 350 of the largest shipping companies and trading companies as, in the world as customers, is how many times do you need to build teams and individual companies looking at the same AIS data or the same PO process? Because big companies have large R&D, if you like, budgets, but really shipping companies are not necessarily, I mean, they are good at matching ships and cargoes, finding the right seafarers, the right crew, making the right contracts, risk hedging properly, but also to be digital innovators. I think that's a question we are being met with a lot. Is why do we all need to have a lab? Why do we all recruit the same people from MIT to come up with very similar ideas? How can this come together? How can we all benefit simultaneously at a fraction of the cost? So I think that's an interesting point. On John's comment earlier on tram business specifically, you're spot on that a lot of investments and breakthroughs have happened in the liner business when it comes to technology. It just so our primary focus is tram. We have about 30% of the world's tanker and dry bulk companies and break bulk companies transacting through us. And the reason why, how can you possibly find standards when there are so few? It starts with the contract language. It starts with the systems, the data structures. It is a very, very, and plus there are so many counterparties, right? If every ship operator has to impose standards on all the different people they do business with, that is an impossibility, I think. So I agree there is more, it is harder to do it in tram, but it is happening. And there is a desire to say, not to become the Uber of the seas or, let's just learn from the airlines. No, because airlines are much more simplistic. They land one place, they take off from one place. So I think that is happening. And a lot is also going on, discussions around this in different contexts in digital, in different forums, right? About crew safety, about emission controls, etc. And it's mostly linked to the tram sector. So I think we'll get there.
Okay, thanks, Kristian. Mr. Anshan, you wanted to come in.
Yes, I have a question for Dr. Usman. In fact, he said that, yes, the class is moving towards, say, advanced technology in terms of survey, issuing a certificate, which is happening, and include more and more in terms of, survey, etc., to the digital video as such. Whether class will pass any of the benefit, to the owners in terms of the annual contract, because they are not spending so much of money for travel, etc. So are you also thinking of passing some of the benefit to the owners in the current scenario?
Yeah, sure, Anshan. Let me respond to that. I think one of the investment, for example, that we put in recently is to use machine learning, right? To use AI as part of, for example, conducting our survey. So, for example, we see then that, instead of the ship owner is the one that planning their survey routine, maybe they want to do a particular survey, let's say in Singapore, and another one, maybe a few months later, which when they realize then that the certificate about to expire, they do it, let's say in Colombo. is that we've invested in this machine learning AI, we call it a smart survey booking, right? That then trying to look at, for example, the next 2 to 3 months, right? What are all the possibilities for, for the customer to conduct the survey, and which location would be best to do it, where the individual surveyor competent is available to do the survey, and that will then reduce, number one, the cost of of the entire survey instead of is being done in 2 or 3 different locations. But the other one also, that reduce the interference, reduce the interference with regards to your operations, right? Because
Right.
our view is then that we like to make sure then that we have less interference to operation, that you can generate the business as much as possible. So that is one example where, through this smart survey booking, we could we have already shown significantly that we support in terms of the operations of the customer, as well as the number of surveys that we need to go on board. The other one I can share is, I think you may be familiar with our direct access to technical expert or date services, where we committed then that if it's urgent, we respond within 4 hours. Because I guess the cost then that we've creating is not just, for example, the class fee, but also if your vessel gets stuck, because of a port state, right? Then the impact to the customer is a lot more significant, that you cannot generate revenue, right, if your vessel gets stuck. So what is key, that we invested a lot to making sure then that we also built, to be honest, Anchan, we built machine learning. So then that the email that comes in to us, a machine will capture, and within second goes to the right person. And so far we have accuracy of maybe close to 90%. That the email comes in anywhere, by the customer, it goes to the right person, the MVGL. And if it's urgent, we are committed to respond, within 4 hours, for example. So that we seen, I said, the customer have responded to say that that really helps them in terms of reducing the vessel downtime, right? That they can continue the operation as quickly as possible.
Okay, Dr. Nora, just before we go to our break, as I said at the beginning, that there's only a relatively small number of IMO members have port community systems. Do you think that more international collaboration is needed to sort of level up the playing field across the world in terms of access to port community systems? And is Macta Gateway playing any role in those international collaboration efforts?
Sure. First, now regarding the port community system, we're among the first to join in the region. We joined the International Port Community System Association. The reason for that we have a strong belief that is very important for us to collaborate. We don't want to be creating our own language or speaking a language that everyone will not understand. Of course, customization is needed, and it's different between a community to a community, and this is why it's called the port community system. But a certain, let's say, extent of the standards need to be there. Collaboration is needed because we cannot assume, or we cannot foresee that the cargo movement or the journey of the cargo is isolated within one country or one country. It's always moving from a port to port. Therefore, the trade needs the information, needs as much as it needs to know exactly what the location of the cargo and the physical cargo itself. So definitely we are among the first to encourage even having this in our region, and we're open to have PCS connection. And this is why you see that we have integrated with more than 9 ports in China, PCS to PCS connection. We also have integrated in ports in Europe, and currently working in more and more integration. Especially during the pandemic, this became evidence, Clive, because a lot of countries within different variation of their policies and laws have started to close or not to close their trade and their basically flights, etc. So we as a country, and especially for the food security and for the sustainability of continuing to having those goods important to us, it became evidence that without having those links of information, we would not be able to identify alternative routes or alternative, I would say, exporter for us in order to secure different things. So this is why I think collaboration is essential and important, and we're very open to collaborate with other PCSs around the world and other single units.
And Chris, I'll give you the final word in this session. Collaboration, I mean, between shipping and ports, is that something you think needs to happen much more in a much more sort of joined up way in terms of digital solutions?
Yeah, I think it's got to increase. But again, there's many hundreds, if not thousands, of ship owners. So each one implementing their own policy probably has to be guided. We probably need some more uniform network or procedures. And maybe if the ports collaborated first on digitalisation, on what they actually need to receive in the port, then the ship owner can follow. So I think it's difficult for a ship owner. We have 30 ships currently. I mean, compared to the world fleet of over 60,000, above 5,000 gross tonnes, it's minuscule. So I think it's difficult for any individual ship owner to come up with their own policy. It would be more prudent for the ports to come up with that first and then convey that back to the ship owners.
Okay. Well, thanks, Chris. I'll draw this part of the session to a conclusion. We're going to have a short commercial break now. I think we've covered some good ground there. I think the need for collaboration is one theme that's come through. Another is the importance of the human element. But I think Khalid's comment around the only limit is imagination is the one that I'll take away, because I think that we have got to think outside the box in these difficult times, and I think that there's evidence that we've heard today of practical ways that that's being done. So thanks to all our panelists. Please stay where you are. We're just going to have a short commercial break where a few commercial messages will be played, and then afterwards we'll come back and I'll put some of the questions that our fantastic audience online has been sending in, and that's usually quite an interesting question hour. So we're ready now to play the messages, and we'll join you back here in about 5 minutes' time.
The winds of change shape the course of our industry. The waves are unpredictable, but we ride them towards promising shores when we come together and move in one direction. We challenge the headwinds and anchor our place in the future. We turn the tide. We steer ahead. We stand out, and we won't stop there. Because what matters most is the impact of our achievements. Impact that pushes us and inspires us to go beyond. We are Abu Dhabi Ports. We are united in our vision.
Cura, 2 words merged into one, standing for Maritime Curators. Today, we are sitting at 700 colleagues from 34 different nationalities working across the world, and customers have always and will continue to be at the center of what we do. That's why they stay with us for decades, much like our colleagues. We have created digital platforms enabling shipping companies to work more efficiently since 2001. We've invested considerably and collaborated extensively with our customers to create a comprehensive and successful analog to digital process, digitalizing physical shipping, administration, and management for over 400 of our existing customers, ranging from shipping companies to trading houses. Our customers obtain comprehensive terminal level analytics and can measure and achieve improvements on their port performance P&L through our integrated platforms. Through detailed predictive impact analysis before port calls to terms, voyage, and port call analytics at an unprecedented level, our customers can decide and plan their most advantageous voyages.
Thank you very much to our sponsors for those messages, and welcome back to our question hour, where we're going to field some questions that were sent in by people during the registration period and also while we've been online. We've got some very good questions, so I'm going to kick off with Chris Peters, and it was a question from Nathaniel Armstrong of Denton's and Company, and his question is, Chris, how have you managed the practicalities of ship delivery and chartering during the current period? Okay,
Nathaniel knows the answer to that. He's asked the question to be okay. Good lawyers, which he's one. The process, we took delivery, as we said, on Monday, of our first new building in a series of 6 vessels. We have another one coming end of next week. And again, as I said in the intro, the process has been challenging. We've had people who were supposed to go to the ship initially. We had to get crew there in advance to go into quarantine. We had documentational issues. We couldn't physically go ourselves from here to the shipyard for delivery of the vessel, so we had to make alternative arrangements. I mean, again, as we've said throughout this conference, digitalisation can help, and certainly the video conference, I think, is going to become a lot more normal going forward, even when flights resume. But I still think certain things you need the human interaction. But the video conference, signing documents either on video or adding digital signatures, have put processes in place that were not normally done before. You need, certainly when you're signing as a deed, it has to be signed physically in the presence of someone witnessing. So now I think with COVID-19 rules and regulations, it's accepted that video conference replaces that. You're in the presence of someone on a video conference when you're signing documents. Again, whether that can move to fully accepted digital signatures, whereby you don't even need people, that would be for the legal profession to actually change how you sign documents deemed a deed. It still confuses me, even as someone who was a banker for nearly 20 years, why some documents have to be deeds and some are not. It's probably to boost the legal fees, actually, for the lawyers. They probably just want to charge us more. And
surely not.
Surely not. No, no one would want to do that. But yeah, I mean, the process went the same as any other ship delivery on the physical closing, but we just had to make sure that everything was lined up in advance. And we had some last minute quirks where we needed to get additional things done. And in this modern world where you can then just additionally sign documents on a Zoom call, that part goes very quickly. But the practicalities, lining up in advance, making sure you have the crew in country to be out of quarantine. You have sea trials for the vessels before they even get delivered. You have to line up the chartering. You have to make sure that the vessel is going to sail when it does. You need to get inspectors. I mean, this is not just for a new build, but for any vessel right now. Having on tankers, you need to have the SIRE inspection. And there's just many places in the world where it's physically not possible. The oil majors are now being fairly accommodating and giving extensions to those dates where you need people to go out. So what I would say is that we have managed the process through video conferencing. We've also circumvented processes that we didn't necessarily think could be. And what I mentioned earlier in the intro about notarizing and apostilling documents, we actually got to an agreement with all parties where that actually wasn't necessary, even though we could have ultimately, in the end, that process was put in place during the full lockdown in Dubai. At the end of the lockdown, it was possible to do it by electronic means. However, we'd already established different processes for not doing that. So that's something that I would hope changes in the future, because there's a lot of cost involved in the normal process of delivering a ship. And I think the digitalisation, electronic, will take some of those costs out. It may add additional costs in. You have to pay different representatives to be in country to do certain things that have to be done on the spot. But then you save in certain other areas on travel costs, as an example, that we haven't incurred for ourselves physically going to a shipyard. So there's pluses and negatives, and overall we've established a process for taking delivery of new building vessels, and we have more to come.
It's an interesting microcosm of how business has changed, but how what you thought always had to be the case, you are now questioning. So I think that's something that we're all having to sort of confront in our business and daily lives. The next question is for Kristian Mordhorst. There's a question from Peter Valles of Inchcape Shipping Services in Dubai, and he says one of the key factors within digitalisation is connectivity. How will in future companies secure the connectivity they need to ensure business continuity? I presume connectivity, we're talking about, that access to things like broadband and the necessary infrastructure to support digitalisation. But that's my interpretation of the question anyway.
I hope not, Clive, because I'm not. We should have had somebody from Inmarsat.
Oh, right.
But I would say actually there is an angle to that which is interesting. Coming back to what we have all learned during the COVID period. I think one of the realizations we've come to quite quickly is that A, it works remotely, and B, why do we then need to have 300 people in an office in Dubai and 300 in Mumbai and 100 in London? We've been very much historically tied down around locations. And I think that not only for Makura, but now understanding how well connected you can be, and even the distinction between synchronous and asynchronous communication, right? We're so used to instant when we're in an office with somebody, but not everything has to be instant. So what we have realized is actually that technology as an enabler to plug into talent pools who are not prepared to move to one of our main locations that's been a great realization for us. So I would say my take on the connectivity is that by using all these technological tools, we would actually be able to connect teams across a much wider geographical span than we have done so far. So basically go to where the talent is, and we're doing that, right? So we don't have to be centered around connection, and communication is not only about when you and I can sit together and meet after things are back to normal, so to speak.
Hey, thanks.
Something.
Yes, please do, Kelly.
Like
Just certainly.
something to the connectivity. On the shore side, nobody has an issue. We have high-speed internet connectivities there, and we can easily. I mean, we're looking at each other very easily at the moment. The challenge is the seafarers. The challenge really is on board the vessels that are ocean-going. If you have vessels in the Atlantic or Pacific, at the end of the day, their connection is getting through the satellite, and it is extremely expensive to have that connection. I just want to emphasize this from us as a ship operator. Maybe Peter can say the same thing. It's not easy. We have 2 years ago, we have upgraded our broadband from 256 to 112 kbps, which is really a joke. If you see 512, what are you talking about? Your telephone is in megabits per second. I'm not sure how many, but it is very expensive. We're still heavily dependent on the international satellite providers. Hans mentioned Inmarsat. Inmarsat is one, and there's a number of suppliers. And this is something that hopefully in the future, with the people like maybe Elon Musk and others that are very adventurous, they will come up with the worldwide internet connection where we can tap into, in the marine industry. So we can have our people who are on board have the capability and ability to have these video connections with their families or a clear connection with the office as well. There is a limitation when you are definitely outside of territorial water, and the limitation is still there, but I'm hoping in the future that will be surpassed and the prices will also go down.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Thank you for that additional information. This is a question for Dr. Nora. It's from a gentleman, Manish Jaiswal of Portal Infosystems. And he says, MACTA has done a fine job in integrating Abu Dhabi PCS to other PCS. Portal believes that the global integration of PCS will ensure seamless data flow. What are your plans for integration with Indian port community systems, and when can we see this happening? I guess there's an important trade link between the region and India, so I guess it's a very topical issue. So are there plans, Dr. Nora?
Thank you for raising this question, and thanks for Manish. Basically, we're currently working on it with Portal. We have already signed with the ports of India in order to build the connections. We have sent a team even to the ports of India when it was visited back in the days, in order to integrate and to agree on the technicality. So we're very optimistic to see the connection running between us and Portal our ports to the Indian ports.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nora. A question now for Dr. Shireen Osman. There's a question from Mohammed Yassain of NMDC. And it's Dr. Shireen, do you believe that some audits can be managed online in the near future? I'm not a technical person related to how audits are currently taking place, but is there a more scope for making them more digital online in the future?
Yes, definitely. I think we have actually in DMVGL, we have started to do office audit, not just within the maritime side, but also with our business assurance when we do this type of ISO audit. This is something that is also available on our website. You just log into DMVGL remote audit, then you can see the processes around that. And for this, as I said, office audit, we have recently done for some of the largest ship managers, such as I think Toma and this OSM. Of course, as long as there's connectivity, and also then the availability of the rest of these participants, right, that needs to be there. So it's a question about more on organization side and simple connectivity like what we have now. So it has been done, and I think that this will continue to increase in the future.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shireen. I've got a question that's been submitted online, and I'm going to put it first to Mr. Anshan, but I think it may be one that others might want to pick up on. And it's from a gentleman called Adwit Singh Gosain. And his question is, the big shippers and commodity traders should be at the forefront of digitalisation, but many have yet to adopt and lead the way. What do you think is holding back the big shippers and commodity traders? I mean, is that something you've experienced, Mr. Anshan? I mean, do you think that's a true comment that the big shippers and traders are perhaps are not as far advanced in digitalisation as they should be? And if so, why do you think that is?
No, I have not experienced, if I understood your question, what you're asking is that the big traders are looking for digitalization, or what is the
well, I think that the question suggests that some of the big shippers, the big cargo owners and traders are not perhaps as digitalized as they should be, and they should be leading the way. But my first question to you was, is that your experience, and if so, why?
No, I have not experienced that. Even I can name few of the largest, whether it's Cargill, Glencore, and all. I've not seen much of a technology there, because what I feel, as I said, it's a high-stake business. So every contract may look identical, but it has its own differences. Considering the continent you operate, considering the port you operate, considering the port infrastructure you have. So I don't think, there can be a very standard contract, or there can be standard way of dealing especially the trading business or the chartering business, though as much as it can look, very, very much identical. So again, I feel, I may go back to my previous comment, is more of an, it's a people business, and every contract is different. So digitalization in trading business or the chartering business is too far away from my point of view.
Okay, all right. Thank you for answering that question. Has Kristian, you perhaps want to add something to that?
Yeah, just on that, I think so. Our experience is actually quite different. I do see them as pioneers in many digital initiatives. Of course, many of those large traders, their primary business is not shipping. So it's like the ocean transportation departments that are really pushing for a lot of things and standards. Now, trading is based on arbitrage, right? So it's, if you know a bit more than your counterpart, then you stand a good chance of making a few bucks. And I think in shipping, and that's coming back to Chris's point earlier about collaboration. In shipping, that is, we're seeing a change there. And very much driven by the largest companies actually saying, no, we want to have standards. We want to eliminate all the nonsensical administration, double, triple, quadruple keying in of the same data. So I would actually disagree with well, I don't know if it was a statement or a question. We actually see the big guys pushing ahead strongly.
Interesting. So yeah, I think the questioner perhaps has not got the response he wanted, but it's actually positive from the point of view that the big cargo owners are taking a lead. This is a question for Bari, for Khalid Al-Hamad, and it's really saying that as the world moves closer to electronic bills of lading and digital documents, what are Bari's plans to eliminate paper? And in your view, can the digitalisation of documents be driven by the private sector, or does it need government and trade body mandates to succeed? So I suppose on the one hand, it's what is Bari doing, but also what needs to happen in terms of the regulatory context to make it a success.
As I said before, at the moment we are paperless, so we have no issue when it comes to paper. Everything is done through the system within Bahri and the vessels, and everybody with different departments. We do approvals and processes and analysis online, so there's no issue. Take it further, a few years ago, I think some of the gents alluded to this, that we've also invested in the big data, what we call Bahri big data. So we have systems on board the vessel where we actually live reading all of the fuel consumption, the power and everything else, and we're doing internal analysis to see the performance of the vessel. We've hired a specialist in ship performance a few years ago. He's heading that group as well. And we receive reports continuously about the performance of the vessels, and he comes back as well with the initiatives and recommendations to make sure that we reduce our fuel consumption, which has been really very useful and has saved us lots of money. Going back specifically to your question, at the end of the day, we are a shipping company and we are prepared to follow any regulatory body. In general, a shipping company always have to follow regulations and best practices. And if there are certain ports where we go to and they do have electronic systems, we will just basically connect to those systems and merge with them. We have no issues. The limitations, as I have said, at least within our industry, when it comes to tankers, let me be very specific on the tanker side, with crude oil or the chemical, many ports around the world are not electronically connected. You still have to do lots of email exchanges. You do have paperwork exchanges. You still have the pilots coming on board and doing the pilot exchange, on paper. So regulation has to start, I believe, within those countries, especially from the ports, as they move into a digital age. I keep using Abu Dhabi as a very good example because I know they've been working on this for a number of years. If they move in, everybody starts following the same approach, then everything will be linked electronically. We don't have to do any email or paperwork. We just log into the system and connect. I'll give you an example of how that works, by the way. In the past, of course, like any other company, we do have our own banking accounts. So when you're processing invoices or payrolls, the head of finance, he will go into the bank account and he starts manually processing these things. We've discussed with the banks why we don't connect our system with your banking so we can do this seamlessly. And they have agreed at the end of the day, we need to integrate both systems. So now from within the Bahri system, you can process everything and it automatically goes from our bank account to the vendor that's approved within the list. It's possible. We cannot impose this on ports. At the end of the day, we are a vessel that's coming to the port following their regulation requirement. We need it to come from the ports, in short.
Okay, thank you, Khalid. A question for Chris Peters. It's a question from Jerry Matthews of Zena Marine, but I'll also combine it a bit with one from Leroy Diaz. Mr. Matthews asks, what software tools are you currently using for ship management in your office? But I think one of the issues might be linked to Mr. Diaz's question, which is, there's a lot of startup and new business solutions out there. How can we engage ship owners with these new technology providers? So it was really around, I suppose, the software tools that ship owners use. Are you finding them adequate? And if so, are you looking to work with new startups and accelerator programs in the companies that you're operating with to sort of get the tools that you actually do need?
Yeah, firstly, our technical management is outsourced to third-party technical managers. So each of those companies that we use, they have their own systems. We then, we're using, it's probably a system many of you are aware of, ShipNet internally for our operations, accounting, finance, which has been a system that's been around for the last 20, 30 years and still works perfectly adequately. It's upgraded and links in. So from inside our office, we are more looking at how we can look at what the ship managers that we employ as third-party managers complete, what systems they have, and then more importantly, looking at the Barbaris big technology. We have looked at our individual ship managers' smart ship, as we call it internally. So how we can get more efficient data from the vessels and then look at that. So it's something I alluded to earlier, but the collaboration isn't there between everyone, because we've seen different systems with different people, and finding, unless you have your own in-house technical management, where you have your own in-house software development to do that, there isn't really a system we've found out there that you can put on every single ship to get the same information. So that's something that needs to be improved in the industry, that people will collaborate, which is becoming a word we're using in this conference, to get that information. Now, some of the larger ship owners, they probably have the capability in-house to put their own technology on their own ships, as I believe Barbaris are doing. But for a smaller ship owner, you need to go and look at what you can find in the market, add that to your vessels, and then get updated information to improve. So the answer to your question is that as an owner operator who doesn't have in-house technology or in-house technical management, then we're reliant on the third-party managers for developing that. And then we're using our conventional systems, which are upgraded, to collate the information as we receive it.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Dr. Osman, did you have your hand up? Did you want to sort of chip in at this point?
Yeah, I think maybe it was 2 questions ago when we're talking about this, the traders and the cargo owners, right? At least in my experience now, then, that we see there's a need for these traders or the cargo owners, the likes of Cargill, to be more transparent about the CO2 emission, about what we call it the scope 3 emission. And we see there's cascading then requests from them as charterers to the owners or the operators, right, to provide the information, to provide the data. So this is something that I would expect moving forward, with this UN, sustainability development goals. There's a lot of push from these stakeholders for information. And I think they would expect this information to come in a standardized way, so then that they can compare, they can benchmark. At least that is the experience that we see with several of these stakeholders here in Singapore, the charterers. And we expect to see more and more of it, with the push towards, the world towards what call it sustainable, investment or sustainable shipping. Yeah. So I think that was the one that I was hoping that just now, Clive, to add in terms of the discussion. So if you don't see it now, I would expect that you will see a lot more of it, in the coming months and years, on the expectation from the charterers and the traders.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks for that. Thanks for putting it in. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you straight away. I didn't see. If anybody wants to speak, just wave your hands and I'll try and get back to you. Dr. Nora.
Yes, thank you, Chris. So I just wanted to comment on the question for Mr. Khalid regarding the efforts of developing those standards, whether it is by private or a government, to start by a government initiative or a private initiative. And to be honest, I just wanted to highlight the word community again. When we say port community system, community is a key because it's a collaboration from both sides. Yes, the ports need to put a lot of effort as a government body in order to enforce and to digitalize. But the way that we started, for example, from our experience, that after the board have issued this strategical direction that we're going to build a port community system or we're going to digitalize, the first thing that we have done to our customer is to bring them on board in a big forum and to tell them that we are going to build a port community system, but we're going to build it by the port community members. So without the participation from the private sectors of what they need and what they want to see in this system and what is the best practice from their international operation and what they need this government entity to build, we will not be able to build a solution that is convenient to our customer. So this is the question that I wanted to highlight.
Thank you, Dr. Nora. Thank you very much. That's very kind. This is a question for Hans Christian Mordhorst from somebody called Letty John. I don't have their company name. And the question is, during this challenging period, how are routine operations with respect to disbursement accounts being affected for commercial and non-commercial port calls, and what measures are being put in place to alleviate the situation? I'm not sure. I'm sure you understand this question better than I because you're fully immersed in disbursement accounts. So I suppose the question is around what impact are we seeing on the way day-to-day operations regarding these accounts are being impacted by the COVID pandemic, and how are things being resolved?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess the question is around disbursement accounts. Essentially, that's your statement of accounts for a port call, all the expenses incurred, which is and typically an agent is pre-funded to some level for expected upcoming expenses, and then they will either have a balance due or a balance payable to the principal. We did see early on, because of the lockdowns, physical lockdowns, that agents were struggling to actually get to the office to issue the disbursement accounts and send them through. But that I think that's not pervasive, and that was a bit of a blip because everybody wants to close the statement of accounts on a voyage, and of course the agent does not want to be, or the supplier does not want to be out of pocket. But I think again, taking a step back and looking at the digital component of it, it's only like 7 years ago that we were actually able to move away from physically sending disbursement accounts invoices. Actually, Khalid was also mentioning before, it would physically be dispatched around the world, which is crazy from a CO2 footprint perspective, from a work load perspective, both on the agent side and on the whoever is receiving. And that's now digital, because all countries have accepted the fact that an original invoice can be digital. It doesn't have to be physically filed away in a cabinet. There's still a few places where the physical world, the analog world, continues to exist. But I think even a country like Japan, where there is a strong bias for physical artifacts, even there we've seen owners come back and say, it's fine, we will accept digital invoices because we can't just, it's not safe to receive something from around the world in pouches and we have 10 people touching them. So I think it's a beautiful, simple example how digital is also a safety measure in a pandemic context that we have now.
Okay, well, thank you, Kristian. I've just got a question now for Dr. Shireen. It's from Mr. T.S. Ong of Singapore, and his question is, for any change such as digitalization to be successful, how do we ensure the people side of the change is in tandem with the technology? So I suppose it's about how do we how do we ensure that the human dimension of the shipping business moves forward at the same pace as the digital one?
Thanks for the question, Song. I think when we look at the people side, I think we got to look things in holistic way. So I can share the experience of the NVGL, right? I think we know then that, the top management all have to be, having the same mindset. So in collaboration, for example, with INSEAD, we designed a course, we call it the Leading the Digital Transformation Program, right, for all its senior management. And then we cascade them to maybe the top 500, call it management. I think in the NVGL, we have about maybe 13,000 people globally. But then we realized at that level itself, it would not be sufficient. So we start to develop what we call it a bite-sized program that everyone in the company can go to online, right? And we make it also interactive, and we encouraging people to discuss with their colleagues. So it needs to have the entirety of people speaking the same language, understanding the same similar concept, right? And understanding then that we need to shift in terms of the mindset. And on the mindset, we see, for example, the growth mindset is one element that is really interesting for companies to consider, because it really believe then that it's okay to make mistake. It's okay then that as part of the learning process, right, that you may feel then that other people could have that better answers than you do. So it is really looking at the entire, I mentioned the holistic mindset, and then the ability for you then to accept then that there's more out there than what you can do on your own. So then going back in terms of the startup, we do have our, what we call it, in-house startup. We call it the Maritime Incubator. But we also work a lot with external startup, right, to get understanding about new technology, new knowledge, and how can this startup, which are more adaptive as an organization, could be plugged in, into the current, solutions of how the voting fits in. So that seems to be a long answer, but it's really required the totality of approach towards the human side.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Osman. The next question is for Dr. Nora, and it's a question, I don't have the gentleman's name, but it's considering multiple blockchain service providers in the shipping and logistics space, will there be a need for open standard for integrating these providers? Again, a technical subject, but I guess it comes to collaboration and the need for standards. Are we seeing a problem with lack of standardization in blockchain service providers?
So currently, Chris, because blockchain is still under development and is still under testing in many places, you will see that a lot of companies are working to develop solution standards because the maturity of the technology itself. So you will see a lot of different parts of the industry are creating their own solutions. But however, these solutions at the end of the day will be, no matter what, limited. They cannot talk to each other. So I would say, yes, there should be some sort of a translator between the different solutions so that they can talk and speak to each other and exchange the data, the signatures, the document that is needed. I can see maybe in the International Port Community System Association may play a role in this. We might find other associations play a role in this. But in general, to be able to exchange between one and another, there should be some sort of a semi-standard so that we can at least translate the document that we have and the information that we have and map it to the other providers.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nora. I have a question for Mr. Anshan. Mr. Anshan, the question is from Dinaka Maladi of Kerry Logistics. And it's really saying, what opportunities do you see for, in the long term, embracing digital for both front and back end operations? So I suppose it's just, in terms of the longer term strategies, what areas are you looking at in terms of embracing digital? I think you're still muted, Mr. Anshan, so you could unmute. Thank you.
Okay. So okay now?
That's brilliant.
Okay, so we are dealing with a global issue as such, and that's when all these technology things have cropped up more and more. Okay, what we feel as for the long-term capability is concerned, we should have the port infrastructure technology and the custom procedure needs to be regulated, and that's when we can see some tangible changes as such. Company like us or the larger ship owners or the operators, having the technology in place will not help unless this is supported by the port infrastructure and the custom procedure, where it needs to be regulated. Like we have seen in whether it's ballast water treatment system, low sulfur fuel 2020, this has all been regulated by IMO. But if you want to see a real tangible change in terms of technology, we should also see some sort of a uniform regulation for the industry by the way of automation as such, and that's when we can see less human contact and we can see practicality across the board as such. Now, in order to upgrade the port infrastructures, yes, some of the rich countries they can do that, But the worrying point is the underdeveloped country or most recent developing country as such, wherein the rich country has to support or some of the United Nations body, whether it's IMF, and they have to support because COVID is like a global problem and it's not an individual country problem as such, So that's when we can see in future, the technology has come into reality as such. The most important thing, for the technology to really sort of move forward is the custom regulation I want to highlight here, because we have seen a different regulation as such, and that's when most of the stuffs are getting blocked in terms of, turnaround of the shipment or turnaround of the vessel as such. We should have some sort of an identical custom regulation across the country so that we use more and more technology as such. So yes, in future this is all possible, subject to we can see the port operation getting more tech as such, along with the custom regulations getting uniform, and it is more of a regulated, just as said about whether in terms of what we have seen. More aggressive manner to implement like ballast water treatment system or the low sulfur fuelers. So I would like to club that technology to a regulation as such.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rancho. Dr. Shireen, did you have your hand up? Sorry, I might have. Did you want to respond to one of the earlier comments?
Yeah, indeed, maybe to respond to that. I think when talking about blockchain or some of this technology, I think what is key is to have that interoperability of the different systems, and especially like what Anchan mentioned on the custom. I think that's going to be really challenging because each country have their own system. Of course, UNCTAD and this UN body, they have tried to what we call it is standardize it. But the implementation side, it's really fragmented, and I think that's the biggest challenge. So maybe leading nations and leading countries, like for example, like UAE, could then hopefully set the tone with regards to ensuring that the different systems, even like blockchain, can interoperate with each other. And then I think we need some of these, what I call it, maybe regional champions, right, in different parts of the world to push, And probably then gradually we hope then, the whole, the different regions in the world, including the underdeveloped regions, could move in the same tandem as the developed nations.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Here's a question for Khalid Al-Hamad. And it's, obviously we've heard about your various digital initiatives over many years. And as you said, you've got an established digital program. But the question is, which single initiative amongst those that you've implemented in the past have served you best during the pandemic?
All of them. I can't say a single one, actually, all of them. One of the things that definitely that immediately helped us was the remote access. Maybe many of the ship management company, all the superintendents, the fleet managers, they always have access to the server. They always have access to the systems. So we've always had that. However, what was different is that during the pandemic, we had to provide the same access for many of the support services, i.e. some of the purchasing, the technical assistance, and so on and so forth. So the infrastructure was there. It was just making sure that those people who generally never worked from home in the past have the capability to work from home. So I would say that the remote access that was there has served us very well. In addition, that the whole system that we are running is online.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. I think there's a question here that I'll actually ask to anybody who wishes to answer it. It's a question from Mohammed Al-Karbi, and he says that last week the Secretary General of the United Nations launched a roadmap for digital cooperation. I believe this roadmap would assist in cooperation, coordination and communication across all sectors. And I just wondered, the question is, how do you see the benefits and challenges of such a roadmap? I don't know if anybody wants to take that one on. I mean, do we need a roadmap on a sort of global level, or do you think it's down to individual countries, individual industry sectors? Hans Christian, do you think a roadmap at a UN level is needed, or is this something that the shipping industry needs to work out itself?
I think anything that if we wait for regulators globally, no less, to come to agreements on something, then we need to have patience, put it like that. And there's something about denominators. Right? Everybody has to be satisfied with something, so it becomes a huge compromise. So I don't know. The regulators will play an important role in certain aspects, as with the emissions control, for example. No doubt about that. But when it comes to thinking digital, I find that I think that would be a big ask of the regulators. Again, the fundamental problem is not so much single platforms or standards. There are no or very few data standards. So what Dr. Shireen mentioned before, interoperability or integration, but above all, sort of mindsets in the private sector to say, well, the value of sitting on data specifically has diminished. The value of having access to a big sea of data is 10x of that. I think that's where the change will come from. I think it would really hard ask to sit back and wait for governments and regulators around the world to agree on a roadmap.
Okay, Mr. Anshan?
To Hans, isn't it this COVID-19 situation will expedite? I can understand that, whether past regulation to what, but isn't it this COVID situation will expedite this thing, and this is the need of the hour, for us to get this regulated to see a very serious impact. So I always, from my point of view, UN or regulatory bodies implementation will have a more of a very tangible effect, And in this case, yeah, sorry.
So I think safety at sea and safety of seafarers, the welfare of seafarers, such items, absolutely. It is required. It was also stated in the beginning, this is shipping's biggest challenge right now, overall. And that can't be solved company by company or even nation by nation. I fully agree. I was only referring to digital roadmaps for shipping. Asking UN to take an interest and become a leading voice in that, I think that would be a struggle. Does that make sense?
But isn't it the port and the custom procedure? Yes, it is a difficult task, even because where we have most of the things, human-to-human contact is in the port, So if that is technology driven, we can limit the human-to-human contact as such. For that, the UN has to come in, because it's not a one country's problem, or it is not an individual problem as such. Since this has become like shipping is a global industry, the COVID is a global problem. So isn't it something like UN has to step in?
Okay. Dr. Nora, you wanted to contribute to this topic?
Yeah, actually, I do understand where Mr. Hans and Dr. Anshan coming from. I think, in my personal opinion, having this roadmap is essential, but it's up to us how to translate the roadmap into practicality, right? So the roadmap, it's a sign of intention. It's a sign of, a willingness, and actually it's coming from a good place that we need to do something as countries in order to support those smaller businesses and bigger businesses to digitalize. I wouldn't assume that the roadmap will identify very specifically what do we need to do in every specific thing. I don't believe that, science can be, just global. It needs to be like a smaller initiative, but the roadmap is absolutely essential in order to place an importance on what we're doing in terms of digitalization. I remember before the COVID, as I said in the beginning of the introduction, before the COVID, when we talk to shipping lines and shipping agents, you will feel the resistance. You will feel that, no, why this is the way that we have been used to do this, and this is why we want to continue doing this. But now when we have this, specifically after COVID, and with the placing of an importance from the United Nations and from the global effort, it will give more weight to the smaller effort that we're doing individually. But definitely it won't be like a very hard-coded standard that we all need to follow if this is what Hans was referring to. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, Hans, do you want to come back quickly?
Quickly, I just want to make as an example. So maybe it's semantics. Maybe I'm understanding the word roadmap in an incorrect way. But the emissions, moving to zero initiative is a good example. So there is an overall statement, we want to make the world a cleaner place. If that qualifies as roadmap, absolutely. The execution, though, that's you mentioned that before, Dr. Shurin. It was not possible to agree on even emission metric standards and how it's being measured. But what is being agreed on now is how do we measure and report on reduction of emissions. Right, so that you could actually find a sort of agreement on in the Global Maritime Forum, working group that this is what we will focus on. So you're right. I mean, from saying this is what we want to achieve on a very high level, absolutely. Of course, the UN or the
specifically maybe specifically maybe for what Mr. Anton had referred to, which is the core obstacles sometimes are the port and the custom. If there is no overall direction to tell them go digital, they won't go digital, and as a consequence, the entire industry will be impacted. So a high-level direction is needed and absolutely essential. But at the end of the day, innovation and the different solutions that need to exist here and there need to be, as Dr. Shireen said, interoperable, but it's need to be coming from a source of innovation and individual effort.
Okay, I've got Khalid and then Chris who want to.
Clive, if this pandemic, which is very bad, it's impacting everybody, and we have a loss of life, we have a loss of livelihood, loss of jobs, and impacting the economy. If anything, it actually is accelerating, no doubt, the technology movement. And for many companies now, if you were thinking about digitalization or having platform, and you were keeping it aside for cost or time or whatever, I can assure you everybody is moving very quickly now to make sure that they are moving into the digital age. Otherwise, they will not survive. If you don't find a way of getting your systems and interaction with everybody else online, then eventually you will fall in the cracks. So there is no doubt that this is moving everybody very quickly, and those who don't move, they will be losing and they will probably disappear, especially if this pandemic takes a very long time, which seems to be this way, at least if there is no medicine for this disease. It's fortunate for us that we've always been digital, so we did not feel the impact at all, only operating normally. But I can fully understand for many companies, they have to move very quickly into the digital age, and they will be forced. Whether you have regulation or you don't have regulation, the market will dictate. At the end of the day, if you want to survive, it's a free market. You want to survive, you have to move into this area to make yourself more efficient online, make sure you get your customers and get your services done quickly.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, it's saying something similar and picking up on Dr. Nora's comments about speaking with agents and other counterparties who said this is the way that we used to do it. So I think if we want to look at positives that are coming out of COVID-19, is that maybe some of those old processes of this is how we used to do it, people are now forced to do it a different way, and maybe that will give us long-term change for the future that will benefit the industry. So some of those old processes will hopefully disappear. The one I mentioned earlier is I can't imagine doing a ship delivery pre-COVID and getting all parties to agree that we don't need to notarise and legalise documents. That would have just been an impossibility. It would have been absolutely essential prerequisite. And moving to other parts of the business, saying this is how we used to do it won't be applicable because people have been forced. So I think once this COVID situation is finished, there will be new processes and practices in place, and that's one of the positives we can look at from COVID-19.
Okay, thanks, Chris. We're nearly the end of this question hour, so I'm very sorry that there are a number of questions that I haven't had a chance to ask. So I'm going to say apologies to my digital audience for only being able to put some of them. But if there are those, I will endeavour, or Maritime Standard will endeavour to communicate them to the relevant person. But I started with giving everybody a chance just to speak for a minute to set their own views. And I thought it's a useful way to end, but just to go around every single panelist and ask a single question. And it was really that you're looking ahead, and we just heard that digitalisation is the key to survival for shipping and the ports industry and for trade generally. I just wondered if I could ask each panelist to identify one particular barrier that they saw to digitalisation and what they saw as being the solution. So sort of a slight to end with a negative but a positive, if you see what I mean, because I think we've all seen the progress that's been made and the huge interest in digitalisation, but it seems to me there are still some obstacles in the way, or some wrinkles that need ironing out. So I'll start with Dr. Nora, as you were the first to speak at the beginning of this webinar. What do you see as the one key barrier that you'd like to sort of identify, and how can we overcome that?
Well, Chris, today's session is under digital solution to pandemic problem, right? So the perspective of understanding that the digital solution, although pandemic started with a virus, but that does not mean that the digital solution will be simply an antivirus. The digital solution needs to come from a place with collaboration, and it's need to overcome all these challenges. So the obstacle will be that I foresee currently that is still, despite the evidence that we need to digitalize and digitally transform, but still we will find challenges between entities and between different parties in order to agree. And this is why I hope that there will be a change in the collaboration forms, and it's need to come from a good place and understand that we're all moving toward advancing an industry, not just ourselves.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nora. Chris Peters.
I think it's probably us, human beings. We've been probably one of the biggest blockages to the transformation. And as we've discussed several times, the unwillingness to collaborate. But I think as this COVID-19 situation has progressed, people have been more willing to cooperate, and I think they will continue to do so in the future. And that will help digital transformation for the industry.
Chris, for those succinct remarks. Dr. Shireen.
Yeah, I think indeed, like what I mentioned earlier, I think the challenges is a lot on the human side. Of course, is the survival instinct, right? That, you know, we keep things to ourselves, but I think, like what's mentioned earlier, I think there's a need to open up our mind towards more industry collaboration, so then that we all can survive and grow stronger together, rather than trying to survive on your own. And I think with that, I think DMVGL, I think we normally like to facilitate this type of industry collaborations. So COVID-19, believe then that the mindset has changed quite a bit. So we hope to see more industry collaboration moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Hans-Christian.
Yeah, I agree fully. Collaboration. It is down to the people. That is the biggest. If you go back 6 months or 9 months at a similar seminar, I'm sure the word disruption would have been up. Digital disruption, disrupt or yourself or die. That this whole notion of where technology was pushed forward as you must do this, otherwise somebody else is going to come and eat you. I think the logic and the dialogue has changed a lot towards, Chris was mentioning, how can we do things differently, consistently, right? And for the long run, how can we have to adapt some new practices, because we can't. There will be no back to normal. Right? There will be a new normal, which may look a lot like what it used to, but it will not be back to how we used to do things. So I think the adaptability to change, doing things new ways, using new systems, is not necessarily a barrier, but that's the big game changer. Organizations who can push that through will win faster than others.
Okay, thanks, Kristian. Khalid Al-Hamad.
I agree with the panelists, and as I said before, it's the technology and digitalization is limited by your imagination. At the end of the day, as well, it requires an investment. It doesn't come free. Everything we have been doing did cost. At the end of the day, that cost was reasonable, and there was a reason for it. So, companies, in order for them to move forward, they have to pay. They have to really put in the investment to make sure that they move forward for them to survive, and it is the future. Even future employees, we're hiring very young people into our vessels, and they're all tech savvy. So things have to move with them, and the limitation, as Peter says, it's the people.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Mr. Anshan.
What I feel that we all have well-oiled technology in-house for the shore operation. Again, I'll come back to regulate the port infrastructure to be technology-driven, along with a uniform custom regulation across the group. Bottom line, as you know, we can make technology way of life, but as Chris mentioned, but without having a human touch on the crew matter, such progress is a futile exercise.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Mr. Anshan. I think we've covered a huge amount of ground today. I mean, I think the messages I take away in no particular order is one is that if we're going to be successful in embedding digital solutions in the shipping and maritime industry, we can't take a silo-based approach. We've got to work across all industries, and you can't leave the tramp side out by just focusing on liner shipping, or you can't leave port agents out if you're focusing on ports. We've actually got to build communities across different industry sectors and different areas of the business. I think the thing is you've got to take people with you. I think it's a human industry, and digital can't be just about machinery. It's got to, or technology. It's got to be about people. And finally, I think it's about you don't have a choice to some extent. I think Khalid was saying, you can look at the return on investment, but if you don't do it, you're not going to survive. So I think companies that perhaps have hesitated because of the cost or the complexity of digitalization have probably got to rethink their strategies, because they're unlikely to be around if they don't embrace these digital solutions in future. So with that, I'd say thank you again to all our panelists, to Dr. Nora, to Chris Peters, to Dr. Shireen Osman, Hans-Peter Mordhaus, Khalid Al-Hamad and Mr. Anshan for taking up their time and giving us the benefits of their insights. I'd like to say thank you to all the people online and our sponsors who make this happen, Abu Dhabi Ports, ADNOC Logistics and Services, J.M. Baxi, Marcura Group and Safe Sea Group. I think these we're in an era where we can't get together in the ways that we normally would do, and I think these webinars are a useful way of exchanging ideas and best practice and stimulating debate, and I hope today has done just that. The next edition of the webinar will be on the 8th of July, and it will focus on financial issues and finance and financing. So I'm sure that will be a very topical subject, because that's a very key issue as well. In a short while, the webinar will close, but when it does, you'll be redirected to a survey. And please take a moment to fill in formal online those questions, because we know we want to get better, and the only way we're going to get better at doing this is if you let us know how we can do that, but also the things that you do like. Hopefully it won't all be about things you want to see improve, but the things that you benefit from. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and it's been a pleasure sharing time with you. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.